What's up everyone, it's Endymion, and recently I made a post-mortem for The Witcher as all signs are leading to the eventual cancellation of the series entirely. I figured I was done, that there was nothing more to be said about Netflix's bastardization of Andrzej Sapkowski's work. That the damage at this point has been severe, but at least it was finally done. Boy was I wrong, so let's get into it. As if everything surrounding The Witcher isn't soured or ruined thanks to Netflix being ran by moronic activists, now one of its producers openly states the show is bad because they think you're all idiots. I wish I was kidding. From Bounding Into Comics, we have the article titled, Netflix's The Witcher executive producer Tomek Baginski says series made simplifications to the source material, primarily because American audiences would not grasp a higher level of nuance and complexity. You heard that right, the show doesn't suck because of the writers, the show sucks because you're all stupid. Baginski was interviewed by a Polish newspaper called, and hopefully I don't butcher this, Gazeta Wyborcza. Baginski defends the decisions he and others made regarding Netflix's version, claiming some people criticize the show for making up weird plots that change what worked well in the books. The producers defend these actions saying, but when you start discussing it, it usually turns out that screenwriters thought this solution out, that it's not completely crazy. I figured I'd let the producer say what he actually thinks, and I quote, "It's no secret that we, the series production team and fans, often disagree. Things are created in the discussion. Michael Nowura, who was our tester, does a great job. He checks what fits the world from books. Sometimes we get such a long list of things from him because in many places we went in a different direction, but there's a reason for it every time. Sometimes the changes are the result of production chaos because, for example, an actor fell ill and his plot needs to be edited and rewritten within a few hours so that it can be shot the next day, because this is not a plot for which the whole production machine will stop. There are a lot of understandable reasons why controversial decisions are made, but the viewer does not have this context. So sometimes it hurts because something was better in the book." To interject here quickly between quotes, Baginski then uses another series that he worked on called Hardcore 44, which was an alternate version story about the Warsaw Uprising during World War II. Anyway, he then compares Hardcore 44's changes with Witcher, and I again quote, "I tried to explain there was an uprising against Germany, but the Russians were across the river, and on the German side there were also soldiers from Hungary or Ukraine. For Americans, it was completely incomprehensible, too complicated, because they grew up in a different historical context, where everything was arranged. America is always good, the rest are the bad guys, and there are no complications. When a series is made for a huge mass of viewers with different experiences from different parts of the world, and a large part of them are Americans, these simplifications not only make sense, they are necessary. It's painful for us, and for me too, but the higher level of nuance and complexity will have a smaller range. It won't reach people. Sometimes it may go too far, but we have to make these decisions and accept them. We resign from cause and effect chains, from linear narration, this book-like narration. When it comes to shows, the younger the public is, the logic of the plot is less significant. What is significant to younger audiences is just emotions, just pure emotions. A bare emotional mix. Those people grew up on TikTok and YouTube, they jump from video to video. Dear children, what you do to yourself makes you less resilient for longer content, for long and complicated chains of cause and effect." End quote. There is a lot to unpack here, but Baginski does say some things that make sense at least. For example, how he says content has been simplified in order to appease to younger audiences, with younger people in general having shorter attention spans than previous generations due to TikTok and things like Twitter. While he is right in this statement, it doesn't exactly defend his position as to why The Witcher is complete butt cheeks. Because The Witcher is a mature series, and it's not meant for children to watch. So to label all content across the board like this makes little sense, since the targeted demographic of The Witcher as to something like Emily in Paris or Paw Patrol are all totally different groups of consumers. Dumbing down content targeted at an over 18-year-old demographic to cater to the mentalities of teenagers doesn't make any sense at all. The Witcher should have been marketed and structured like Game of Thrones was. A mature show full of adult themes that doesn't sugarcoat or dumb down its material so small babies on TikTok can watch. Parents are letting their kids watch Game of Thrones. I mean, that's a parenting issue, not a storytelling one, I'd say. I totally understand having to change little things here or there in order to fit live-action settings, or when shows find creative ways to present something in order to save on budget or make it more practical. A good example of this would be how Cyborg is depicted in Doom Patrol. Obviously the character is, well, a cyborg, and half his face is of course machine. But instead of spending insane amounts of money CGIing the actor's face, they simply wear a costume headpiece that simulates the cybernetic look needed for the character. It still makes the actor look like the character in the comics, and it's obviously a much cheaper solution than constant CGI. The same could be said about a lot of the designs of Doom Patrol characters actually. Costume design and practical effects over constant CGI is always welcome in my books. And while Baginski is right that audiences do not always have the added context as to why things have been changed, it's also not the audience's job to simply accept things that don't cater to their wants or desires. Audiences are by and large consumers, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's up to the people in charge of making content to ensure what is being presented makes sense, and that it serves to strengthen the product that they're showing to consumers. It's not mine or anyone watching this's fault that Geralt has been sidelined like crazy within the Netflix series. It's not the audience's responsibility to say, oh, they didn't want to use Cavill too much because he's expensive or whatever. It's your job as the producer of a multi-million-dollar international show to ensure you give people what they want. And when you don't, that's how the current situation you're all in happens to begin with. As for when Bakinski uses his other series, Hardcore 44, as reasoning for simplifying things, it also doesn't make sense. If things are complicated within context, it's your job to take those things and present them in a way that makes audiences understand. Yes, at the core of it, a producer's job is to use concepts like simplifying stuff to make content better. But there's a stark difference between simplifying and completely dumbing down a product until it no longer resembles what it's based on anymore. And saying things like higher levels of nuance or complexity will have a smaller range is just bullshit, and you know it. When tons of shows like Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, or even animated ones like Avatar: The Last Airbender are all able to deliver compelling stories with nuance and complexity. Honestly, the more I read and think about how Netflix and its producers like Bakinski approach The Witcher as a live-action show, it seems like the problem wasn't that The Witcher is a complex series, but more so that the people in charge of adapting it are just incompetent at their jobs. Netflix released a making of Witcher Season 3, which I can't show because Netflix is anal about people using their content, but Bakinski says in it that while Time of Contempt, which is the book Season 3 is based on, is full of politics, they instead chose to simplify this by throwing all of the political stuff onto Yennefer this season. In the books, it's Vilgefortz who, for example, saves everyone at Sodden Hill, and the Conclave was organized by Vilgefortz as well. But even that was considered too complicated according to Baginski, which is why Yennefer is instead the one to save everyone at Sodden Hill. Although Baginski would like to say this was done for simplifying things, I personally think it's just because Netflix didn't vibe with the idea of a male mage saving the lives of countless female ones. Because women are strong and independent, and we can't have them being saved by men, even though in real life the majority of police, firefighters, ambulance workers are men who save lives. But forget about all that and embrace the girl bossing, dear audience. Women are, after all, better than men in every way anyway. Or at least that's what these insane writers and studios think to push at any chance they get, it seems. But what's funny is that through their girl bossing narrative, they altered events within the Netflix adaptation to make Yennefer the cause of almost every major disaster. So in turn, while Netflix tried to make Yennefer a girl boss with her own agency, they inadvertently made her into the catalyst that ruins everything. Which is not very girl boss of her, but at least she gets screen time, I guess. Then there's the Thanad coup, which you guessed it, Baginski also said had to be simplified. Baginski said we had to simplify politics behind it because the Thanad coup is very complex politically, because at the same time, we have Nilfgaard, Redania, mages, Skolyatel, and Vilgefortz playing all their games. So yet again, Baginski thought audiences were too stupid to grasp multiple factions in a room together. So that also had to be dumbed down to meet modern audience sensibilities apparently. They also simplified the elven connection to the plot since they also felt that was too complicated for fans to understand within a live-action show. They are, however, keeping Yennefer front and center going forward, even though at this point in the books she no longer has any real agency. Since she basically gets imprisoned for a long time, but we can't have that because Yennefer is a girl boss, so of course, they have to change that as well. Basically, Netflix and producers like Baginski looked at everything within the books and went, damn, that's crazy. Anyway, we're gonna make this stupid so it's easier to follow, and the rest you could say is history. I mean, this isn't even the first or last time we'll see a European author's work get absolutely sashimied into modern audience nonsense. But thankfully, some are not willing to bend the knee. Back in 2018, which is a life ago at this point, but anyway, there was originally going to be a movie about the popular Russian novel Metro 2033. You've probably played the games as well, which are excellent by the way, and you should definitely play them. Anyway, that movie never came to be because its author Dmitry Glukowski put his foot down and rejected the screenwriter's changes. Apparently, the Hollywood studios wanted to Americanize Metro's story and move the movie setting from Russia to Washington, D.C., which if you've read or played the games, that completely ruins it and makes zero sense. Dmitry said back in 2018, and I quote, "A lot of things didn't work out in Washington, D.C. In Washington, D.C., Nazis don't work, communists don't work at all, and the dark ones don't work. Washington, D.C. is a black city, basically. That's not at all the illusion I want to have. It's a metaphor of general xenophobia, but it's not a comment on African Americans at all, so it didn't work. They had to replace the dark ones with some kind of random beast, and as long as the beasts don't look human, the entire story of xenophobia doesn't work, which was very important to me as a convinced internationalist. They turned it into a very generic thing. With Metro Last Light and Metro 2033, the books and the games selling millions and millions of copies worldwide, it's probably not as improbable now that people would accept a story happening in Moscow because that's going to be the unique selling point. We've seen the American version of Apocalypse a lot of times, and the audiences that like the genre are educated and saturated and not really wishing to get any more of that," end quote. I applaud Dmitry for his devotion to his life's work, since had he just accepted the paycheck, we would have had a Metro movie that rejected everything that was unique about it in order to cater to modern audiences. Just look at The Witcher as well. The IP was changed from a primarily Eastern European demographic to reflect the world, because modern day activist writers need everything to be diverse. But ultimately, this is where Netflix failed when it comes to The Witcher, and where Dmitry wins when it comes to his Metro books. The strengths and uniqueness of properties like Witcher or Metro aren't in their diversity or international look. They're unique because they personify and exemplify both the great and horrible qualities of the people and the nations they inhabit. Nothing is 100% right or good, except maybe a cute little dog, I guess. But when it comes to stories, if there's no nuance, no complexity, then all you're left with is nothing but a pointless story effectively removed from what makes it great to begin with. The Witcher is a terrible show because Netflix didn't want to make The Witcher. They wanted to make a Netflix show that championed all the nonsense they care about and remove any of the unique properties and DNA that made Witcher unique in the first place. Had Netflix approached it the same way Dmitry wanted with Metro, we could be in a different place, where unique stories aren't robbed of their complexity or identity for the sake of virtue signaling. But until Hollywood realizes that it's not audiences that are at fault, but the people putting pen to paper in these multi-million-dollar deals, we will continue to be spoon-fed less complex, less nuanced, and most importantly, less interesting forms of entertainment in the future. So by removing the complexity of The Witcher, Tomek Baginski and the rest of his friends at Netflix